Today we're doing Module 5, Lesson 9. The objective is to build and write fractions greater than one whole using unit fractions. So the materials needed for today are your online whiteboard or your whiteboard dry erase marker and dry eraser. You may also want your fraction strips out to help you reference. And the teaching style we're going to follow is where I do it, we do it together, and you do it on your own. Let's take a look at an example first. I'm going to show you how we do it. So this says each figure represents one whole. Fill in the chart. So if we're looking at this square right here that is broken into pieces, this figure represents one whole. So you can see that we actually have two figures. So we have more than one whole. And you can see that we're also dealing with shaded versus non-shaded pieces, okay? So we're kind of building on what we've been practicing this week, except now we're looking at figures or shapes that are more than one whole. So the first space here asks for the unit fraction. So the unit fraction is always how much is one piece of the whole worth. So we're always going to start our unit fraction with 1 over something. It's going to be 1 over how many pieces we have all together. So remember, we just want to look at one shape for right now. Okay? How many pieces are in this one shape? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There are 8 pieces all together in that one shape. So if we're talking about a unit fraction, we're saying a unit fraction is 1/8 for this piece, okay? And if you look at your fraction strip that's broken into eighths, you'll notice that we labeled each of those pieces 1/8. So we labeled them with the unit fraction. Okay, remember that unit fraction is always how much one piece is out of the whole. Next, it's asking the total number of units shaded. So now we're going to look at both of the shapes and figure out how many altogether pieces are shaded. Well, we know all 8 of these pieces are shaded. So that's 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. There are 15 units shaded. But now it wants us to put that into fraction form. So what is the fraction that is shaded? Well, 15 of the pieces are shaded out of the 8 pieces, okay? It's broken into eighths. So our denominator is always the number of pieces that it's broken into. So in this case, since we have more than one whole, our top number is going to be more than our bottom number, okay? So we have 15 pieces shaded out of 8 pieces, okay? Out of figures broken into 8 pieces or eighths. So we would say this as 15 eighths. Now, the reason that we don't say that this is 15 sixteenths, okay, because there are 16 pieces all together in both of the figures. But if we wrote this as 15 over 16, that would be like saying we had a square that was broken into 16 pieces. Okay, and that we had 15 of those pieces shaded. Okay. And this is not the picture that we have. We don't have 15 pieces shaded out of 16. So this is not correct. We have 15 pieces shaded, and each shape is broken into 8 pieces. So that's why we write it 15 over 8, or 15/8. Okay, and that'll become a little more familiar as we practice. So let's go ahead and do an example together. You can see here we have 3 different figures. Each figure represents one whole. So we're going to start by looking at just one figure and figure out the unit fraction. So remember that unit fraction is always 1 out of something. And I don't need you to draw these shapes on your board. You can just look at them on my screen and just pick a place on your whiteboard to write the unit fraction. So 1 over what? Go ahead and fill in what number goes on the bottom of this fraction. So how many pieces are there all together in one shape? Okay, so the unit fraction, you should have wrote 1 out of 6. If we count, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces all together in one figure. So the unit fraction is 1/6. So that's saying each of these units or each of these squares is worth 1/6. Well, let's find out how many of those squares are shaded. Go ahead and count and then write on your whiteboard. What are the total number of units shaded or colored in? Okay, so I could have gone through and I could have counted 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. 14 of those units are shaded, or 14 boxes are shaded. You also may have noticed that all 6 of these are shaded and all 6 of these are shaded. So we could have used our multiplication skills and skip counted by 6s, 6, 12, and then could have just gone 13, 14. Or you may have done it even simpler and counted by 2s, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, 14. Okay, just thinking about how you can use what we learned this year to count faster. Okay, so now let's look at the fraction shaded. So remember, we're going to write how many pieces are shaded all together on top, and on bottom, how many pieces is our figure broken into. Go ahead and write what fraction shaded you think there is, and then we'll go over it together. Okay, so let's check your answer with mine. The number on top, or the numerator, is how many total number of pieces are shaded. And we already said there are 14 pieces shaded. For the denominator, we can actually look over to our denominator and our unit fraction, and it should be the same because each of our shapes is broken into 6 pieces. So we would say the fraction shaded is 14/6. 14 pieces are shaded, and each of the figures are broken into 6 pieces. Okay, go ahead and erase your whiteboards. Let's try one more example together before you get started. Let's start with the unit fraction. So on your whiteboard, I want you to write the unit fraction, which we know is how much one piece is worth. So look at just one of these holes and figure out how many pieces there are. And go ahead and write that on your whiteboard, and then we'll check your work with mine. Okay, so the unit fraction is how much one piece represents. You can see our fraction shape over here is broken into 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 pieces. So your unit fraction should be 1/5 or 1/5 because our shape is broken into fifths. Okay, now go ahead and write on your whiteboard the total number of units shaded. So now we're looking at all of the figures and counting how many pieces are shaded all together. And go ahead and write that number on your whiteboard. Okay, so we should have counted that there were 5 pieces here. So 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 pieces, or 8 of those units, are shaded. Now go ahead and write that as a fraction. How many pieces are shaded over how many pieces each shape is broken into? Go ahead and write that on your whiteboard, and then we'll check your work with mine. Okay, so let's check your work with mine. We know that 8 pieces are shaded, and our shapes are broken into fifths, which is the denominator we had over here. So we keep that same denominator because we did not change how many pieces our shapes were broken into. So the fraction shaded is 8/5. 8 pieces shaded, each shape is broken into 5 pieces. Okay, let's take a look at what you're going to be working on by yourself today. Your homework is CAMI number 1, which is actually filling in this whole chart. You can see that they already did this part for you up top as an example. Okay, so that can kind of help you remember what we did today as well. So you remember what you're filling in each box. Okay, So you've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different parts that you're going to be doing. Filling in the unit fraction, which always starts with the 1 on top, and the bottom number or your denominator is how many pieces just one shape is broken into. So you can see that one shape is broken into 2 pieces, which is why they did 1/2 or 1/2. Then you'll count how many units are shaded and then make that into a fraction of what is shaded. Go ahead and begin.